All right. So I guess we can open the panel for everyone to talk regarding new attacks on web. I guess we had one question that was pending. Maybe we can start with that.
I believe two related ones, right? I believe Roberto had some question about CNAME. Yeah.
Yeah. So Lorenzo, I think already responded in a way, but
I guess there's a follow-up to that, which your question, which is what makes Brave's approach to CNAME blocking better than Safari's? And do you have an idea on that? Like, why the difference?
Yeah, so I can comment a little bit on that. And if Alex is still online, Alex Whitman is the one who did most of the analysis on browsers. But and there was a little bit of back and forth in chat too. So at least for Brave, the mechanism for blocking is based on block lists. Safari, probably too. There is some discussion on WebKit blogs on what WebKit does to deal with CNAME clocking, but those mostly relate to cookie expiry policies, and those that don't seem to likely to be the cause of the behavior we observed. And for that reason, we suspect Safari also uses a block list. Now, if that's the case, then probably the superior effectiveness of Brave has come down to a more aggressive block list. There are pros and cons of being aggressive in deciding what to put in those block lists, because there are a lot of legitimate traffic engineering reasons why CNAME clocking can be used too. So perhaps Brave just chose to be more aggressive in what they consider CNAME clocking. That's the best sort of conclusion we can reach. We haven't performed like code analysis of browsers, so we don't have really strong quantitative evidence to support this conclusion.
Follow up, Lorenzo, on this. I mean, if there are browsers that don't, in a way, don't have any defense, say, I mean, like you said, we don't know. Maybe Chrome does, maybe it doesn't, as well as other browsers. But maybe, I mean, I guess as a browser developer, I'm thinking like, could it be because I'm saying this is a web developer's problem and not my problem? I mean, after all, if you have a first-party redirection, it's because of their included content, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, it's entirely possible. I mean, that's entirely possible. It's entirely possible that also there is concern about breaking functionality if by deploying aggressive defenses. And look, we purposely stop short of saying CNAME clocking is universally bad, because it's not. We do believe, though, there are instances where using CNAME clocking creates problems. It particularly seems to confuse the browser, but also the web developer in exfiltrating data that should not go to third parties. If the website generates a cryptographically strong authentication token that allows me to impersonate an authenticated user and then start sending those tokens to third parties which are completely outside the organizational control of the first party, that's a potential issue. So that's the only issue we really feel comfortable pointing out. This sort of confusion which is generated both in the browser and the web developer pertaining sensitive authentication material. And that's we could probably agree that a negative consequence of CNAME clocking should be either dealt with at the level of better website development or at the level of web browser security, but should be dealt with in some point in the pipeline.
Do you know if the web developers are actually aware of it? I mean, I'm wondering like if there has been a campaign to to let them know, hey, this is a problem potentially for you. Are you aware of this?
Well, some in the community have strong feeling against CNAME clocking. There seems to be knowledge in the web security community that this phenomenon is happening, and some people think it's not a good development for web security. Personally, we run into the issue that notifying website maintainers of this issue did not elicit any response or acknowledgement. I believe there was a Usenix paper, maybe one of the authors, I think it was here, Max was earlier here today, which discussed, I think, at broad strokes, how hard it is to get web developers to acknowledge and deal with website issues. We ran headlong into that issue, which basically is no one seems to be willing to acknowledge or deal with this problem. It's entirely possible. We stop short of mounting attacks against websites based on this type of exfiltration. It's entirely possible that that's actually a possibility, that exfiltrated cryptographic material may allow someone to run impersonation attacks. I believe there is more work to do to make the conclusion, but even the fact that that's a possible consequence, I think should at least cause people to pay some attention, at least in my opinion.
I'm another author on the paper, and I also just wanted to make an additional point here, which is that it feels like CNAME cloaking was intended to get around advertising block lists. So an advertiser will tell the first party, just add us to a CNAME so that we can get around as a subdomain of your main URL, and that will get us around the block list. What ends up happening in practice is that there's all the unintended consequences of that, like kind of breaking down the protections of the same origin policy, allowing these cookie exfiltration, and you can prevent a cookie from going to a subdomain. You can write a browser policy. But the fact that first-party websites are not making that choice makes it seem that they don't understand the full implications of what they're doing when they allow the CNAME.
Yeah, after all, they want to make money, right? So it's actually
Well,
not
right,
it's a common it's a common excuse.
Kind of put this in the chat as well, but maybe one of the differences between Brave and Safari is that all Brave has to do is detect an advertisement and then they'll block it, right? Because Brave has a very aggressive stance against advertising. So in some sense, it's an easier problem for Brave because they just have to do the recursive lookup on the CNAME, and if they detect like, hey, this is advertising, that's enough for them to block it. They don't have to try and say like something malicious is going on here. They just have to say it's advertising, we're done.
I mean, there is sorry, just one last comment here for the discussion. It seems like, by pushing so much for ad blocking, we as a community, potentially we are pushing web developers to find workarounds that have implications for security and privacy of users that don't understand. And again, they just want to make money, right? So I don't know, just a thought.
That's an excellent point. Like probably you're kind of causing some type of evolutionary pressure that generates unintended consequences, something something which is certainly not good. But I think that the one point that Drew made is that advertisers could get exactly the same result advertising-wise and avoid exfiltration of sensitive authentication material if they just wrote better cookie policies in their website. So it's not even a matter of, this is happens because of advertising. It's like this is a byproduct of advertising, which could be easily avoided without affecting advertising if people just paid more attention when they write their cookie policy. So it seems something that should be possible to solve without causing harm to advertising revenue or anything.
Point.
I want to sneak in like one point, not with this, but I just want to take a step back and like observe or track, right? So we have, I guess, 2 social engineering attack papers, and the first paper we could think of that as privacy invasion in an organized manner by the organizations. So we, again, tying in with the keynote, we see the 2 social engineering attacks, the increase of social engineering as such. So it reflects that. And so, and also it's interesting, these are all attacks. So we're still lagging in the defensive side. So when we talk about the defenses, what I want to ask you all is, so say we have a defensive solution. Do we have a way to evaluate such a defensive solution? Like, for example, to conduct. So the problem with social engineering scams is they work in a massive scale, right? You do them in massively, and some of the users fall for it. But so say we have a phishing defense. How can we test it against a certain number of users? And are there some methodologies to test? And does the panel have any points on that?
I mean, I think with the problem I was looking at on YouTube, likely what so one point worth bringing up is that YouTube is certainly probably aware to some degree of this problem, and the existing solution is probably just to wait for enough reports to come in and then to look at that video to mitigate it. So it's more of like the phishing blacklist solution than a like effective proactive solution. And I'm not, it may be, one of the things that was seen throughout the study is like identical videos being used for the same, or identical graphics being used. And we didn't have enough data to try to use machine learning or use sort of logo recognition to sort of catch on to these scams. But I think certainly something like that could be used to proactively catch these problems, just in the same way that YouTube is able to proactively catch copyright.
Sorry, I just want to add, yes, so machine learning is a good viable solution to proactively instead of reactively, like I guess block this. But along the same lines, say we have a machine learning solution that we are proposing. Like, so how do we evaluate it? Or I guess some sort of a defense. How effective is it in blocking the victims? Because when we conduct a user study, the problem is that in that setting, users are really conscious of being exposed to security attacks because it's conducting by a security team, and they'll be more more cautious. As opposed to in regular life, they could be, in their day-to-day activities, they could be less cautious and in a regular kind of behavior. So you can, in your experimental setup, say, hey, this works because all your users are cautious, but once out in the wild, that's not the case. And how do we account for this? I know.
The first thing that pops into my mind with the YouTube problem is like the sort of rate of report. I would assume they have like some sort of reporting statistics over time, but I can immediately think of problems with using that as a metric for like I said in the talk, that it's audiovisual content, so it's very hard to do a lot of things automatically with it and evaluate things systematically.
Yeah, I guess it's a little sad that you have to wait for a number of reports to accumulate before they can take on it. That basically means some people have fallen for it. And that's the definition of a reactive defense, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's sort of the worry to me, is that it takes, not a lot of effort to report things, but it takes some degree of effort. And the sort of origin of this study for me was me remembering being a kid and searching these sorts of things and not acting, not like reporting them, not doing anything about them, really. Just moving on to the next thing. I was like, surely one of these will let me get RuneScape currency or something. Well, and also I think part of it is that people are like trained to expect delay. I think, in Adam's talk where he saw that website that was like, we may have delays because of COVID-19. You look in the comments of these videos and it's people like, help, it's not working. Why is it not working? They don't assume that they've been sort of scam. They assume that they're doing something wrong. So there's sort of a barrier it's kind of like the Nigerian email scam problem, where the type of people who would search for these videos and actually go through with trying them are probably not the same type of people who will be like sort of forthright enough to know that it's a scam and figure that out.
So Elias, seems that from what you're saying, maybe there is some type of feedback on that can be leveraged to identify those issues, right? You mean that people that fall for those scams oftentimes post comments in terms of, this video promised me something and that's not providing. Can those things be leveraged for like scam detection, like on large scale?
I think more so than that. I think what can be leveraged is the same techniques used to detect like comment spam, because part of why I kind of assume that I've seen the people behind these videos literally say they purchase comments in some cases. But when you look at the comments on a lot of these videos that have a lot of these scam videos, what you see is identical comments where whoever is being paid to comment is sort of advertising a different scam. And they're like, this worked for me in 2020 or 20, that isn't sort of like, and then it's a bit.ly link. And it's kind of weird that there's like a massive amount of those comments on a video from 2018 that just have not been taken down or automatically registered. And so that may be a case where those, this is a case for perhaps future work, but we didn't look at we didn't systematically evaluate the comments, but I certainly think that's something that could help, to your point.
So I had one question, like just to again stay back a little bit in terms of what we are seeing. That again, like coming back to phishing talk, right, by Adam, that okay, we started with this classical phishing, and every day right now, like this new type of scam pops up, right, which is like also like using the similar techniques like to phishing, right, but it's not classical. Now you'll be intrigued to install browser extensions, right? You're intrigued to call technical support scammers, right? Now this scams on YouTube, right, on social platforms and so on and so forth, right? So it looks like this landscape increasing, and I guess we have one Adam here, right? Some Adam, if you would like to join conversation and maybe brainstorm a little bit about whether similar techniques used by different kind of scam pages, not only like classical phishing, and whether like a phish time platform can be extended to also accommodate like evaluation of those.
Yeah, I do have some ideas, and apologies for the video. My webcam was crashed. But one thing I've observed, and actually was going to ask for last talk, is that there are tutorials, right, that get posted on YouTube by scammers where they try to teach other scammers. So, you know, these tutorials could potentially play a role in not only, you know, understanding the types of techniques and tools that are being used, but also using that as like a source of intelligence to, you know, figure out exactly what's currently going on and maybe even mitigating the specific attacks that are referenced. So, you know, I feel that this is something that can be applied, for example, in anti-phishing. These tutorials might talk about how to leverage the data that was stolen, right? So we understand that there's a phishing website that stole some credentials and some, you know, biographical information. And then we go to these YouTube videos and they tell us exactly how we forge web requests that appear to impersonate that user. You know, maybe they're based in Phoenix, Arizona. So, you know, they set up a fraud browser with the same user agent as the victim, and they try to find a proxy that goes through Phoenix and then, you know, attempt logins using those credentials. So it's interesting. It's an interesting opportunity, I think, both for measurement and mitigation.
Yeah, I think I didn't see any YouTube videos instructing how to build these scams, but as I mentioned, we found a forum that sort of provided instructions on these sort of like fraudulent CPA, cost per action monetization. And there was certainly like talk about YouTube, and, you know, if we, you know, future work, more energy put into it, I think that's certainly a way to evaluate what they're doing more in depth. So yeah, that's an interesting point.
It seems there's Sebastian, you mentioned there's a question.
Yes, I wanted to touch the topic on a bit philosophical maybe, but on the question of the reactive versus the proactive approaches and the consequences they bring to the content. Like it is a broader, of course, a very broader dialogue, the content moderation on any social website. But at least in these kinds of malware, I think there is a very also a very gradient approach in the way that these big companies face these challenges. But I just wanted to touch the topic and see a bit more on your opinions regarding that, and what would you think that could gain us a more balanced approach. Like I work for an NGO that works with human rights, and I think like freedom of speech, it's a very prime right of any human. But of course, these kinds of abuse on the platform are some kind of thing that could be like, except for the scam, like when does a scam then infringe on it? Blocking a scam does not infringe on free speech, but of course then there is a very blurry line between both of them. So how can then we gain first more higher quality automated systems that can attack phishing, for example, within an automated approach, while having a human component that can help us say that if a content is really infringing on someone's, like, is it really a scam or is it just a dissent opinion? So that was my contribution. I don't know what you think or would like to comment on it.
Oh, I think this is a very interesting. Sorry, was there somebody else trying to?
No, you can go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a very interesting discussion point and also a challenging area. You know, my perspective is probably more from anti-phishing, but I think all the other, you know, free speech and censorship, moderation, all that stuff is probably also fair game for discussion. The observation that I've made is that when we talk about anti-phishing, we're looking at specific pieces of content that need to be taken down or blocked, right? And oftentimes the service providers or the hosting providers, they need clear evidence to be able to do that. Otherwise, they risk, upsetting their customers or disrupting their own business and so on and so forth. So when we talk about proactive solutions that may be able to make detections accurately and earlier, and reactive systems, I think the key challenge is to actually gain this actionability. Because we lack that actionability even when there is intelligence about attacks proactively. And I think one possible solution or an area to explore is to have some sort of system, and it could be a client-based system, where that decision is made on behalf of the user and where the user has some sort of control on whether or not to take the advice of the system or to view the content anyway. And that would take away the responsibility from necessarily the hosting provider. But it is an interesting topic and definitely an area for future research and solving these problems.
I think if I might chip in, I would say something along the lines of what Adam said, that it's always kind of a trade-off, because these anti-phishing engines or tools cannot keep blocking very reputed domains, like they can't block Google or Microsoft. And one of the talks that Dr. Dupé had was that these anti-phishing tools have to go and automatically crawl for features that phishing or drive-by download URLs have. But since the attackers are getting more smarter, evolving all the time, so using an automated measure like machine learning or some other sophisticated algorithm, generalizing those approaches is actually pretty hard. Because the attackers are improving their solutions, and they're getting more and more more wicked. They're always one step ahead of us. So I think the best way at this point is manual observation. So you have community-based phishing blacklists like Fish Tank, where people actually go through these URLs and they say, oh, this is phishing, and then people can actually rate those URLs that, yeah, this person is right. But on a larger scale, I think doing that is pretty difficult. But because if you're using dealing with 1 million different URLs, it's I think very difficult to create a general algorithm.
I definitely agree that it's hard to proactive. I think you look at the problem with phone phreakers, where they tried to wiretap people to figure out if they were phone phreaking, and then the Supreme Court ruled that was not allowed because they had, you had to get a subpoena and stuff like that. So, that's been a problem with sort of hacking mitigation since long before I was alive even. But I do think one interesting point is that with YouTube in particular, they are already automatically taking things down without sort of proactive, definite proof. And that's they do it sometimes controversial, and I think they can the problems with that show exactly what Adam was talking about, which is that it makes customers unhappy when you sort of do things proactively. But my point with that is that I think if they're willing to be proactive about some things, I think this is the kind of problem that they should look into as well.
I'm struggling a little bit with something, which is it for us as technical security experts to solve this problem of deciding where the line is between when it's appropriate to take something down or not? It doesn't seem that it should be something solved at the technology. I mean, it is currently solved at the technological level. The technology decides what is good and what is bad. But is it a useful use of our time and energy to precisely figure out where that line falls? Because this seems to me more like a political society type of decision than a technical one.
If talking about classical phishing or such kind of attacks, I would say maybe not going too proactively, but in real time, right? And this is something that also basically there's a lot of work is going on right in industry about it, right? Basically to move everything in real time. Basically, this comes to the fact blacklists, blocking domains, blocking URLs. Yeah, that doesn't work, right? This is too much reactive, and you need to analyze content and every other signals in real time. In this case, basically, you can protect very quick, but coming to proactive, I would say it's even next step. So it may be harder. And why do we need to research this? I think why technology involved, right? Because it's coming to your point is that technologically it's hard, right? And you have also constraints on resources, on your detection should be fast, whatever machine learning, right? And so on and so forth. Combining together a little bit of phishing and scam, but yeah, this one other angle.
Right. I wonder if the problem is that we started in a world where it was very easy to define what was bad. Like, if you think 20 years ago, blocking phishing emails, like there was no one would tell you, oh, you're blocking like freedom of expression because someone wants to sell me Viagra and I want to see that email. But now I think there is a gray area between what is a legitimate piece of content and what is a not legitimate piece of content. And maybe, when we started doing this job, like at least me many years ago, that the gray area was very small, and now it's kind of kept expanding.
I think we are running a little out of time, so we have to conclude this here. But great discussion. You can please keep it going on the Slack channel. And all right, thank you all for attending this session.
Yes, thank you for.
It was a wonderful session.
Thank you for sharing.